Horses is a horror game that not many people will play, mostly due to the fact that it was banned on Steam and most digital storefronts, but also due to its extremely disturbing content. But what is this controversial horror game actually about? The reasons for its bans are unknown, and only speculation on why is the information that we currently have. And after completing the game, there's many moments for why it could have been banned. Now, this isn't normally the kind of game I would even think of covering or do cover on this channel. Banned content. Well, actually, technically Corpse Party was banned from sale for the Switch in the West, so I guess I kind of do. But normally I prefer to cover games that are less like, for example, Postal, and more narratively in-depth rather than so-called shock horror. But with Horses, I was completely wrong. While it has scenes that lean towards the extreme, behind the shocking imagery is a profound story about the abuse of power and the systemic dehumanization that follows. And today, we're going to go through it entirely and explain why first opinions on this game can be so misleading. If you enjoy this video at any time, the best way to support me is to like the video, hype it, that's a new thing apparently, subscribe for more, and comment below. Horses starts with the main menu of relaxing sounding music and colourful flowers. This is to invoke the feeling of freedom and peace, and this will be the last time we see any colour for the entire game. And the game starts with a warning screen informing us of the kind of content this game includes. A lot of bad things. In the background is the sound of a projector. This will never stop playing the entire game. And that's because Horses uniquely is the aesthetic of a silent movie. No spoken words, only flashcards for dialogue. And the colour is pure black and white. We see the quick images of a movie projector that will make sense by the end of the game. And then Prologue. See, this game is made by an Italian developer called Santa Ragione. The first scene we see is our character, a very close-up shot of him as he stares at a gate. This is Anselmo, our main protagonist. He is also kind of a vessel for player choice, or our lack of choices. If we walk up to the gate, the game will change to a live action video. This was something I've mentioned before on the channel for switching of art styles in horror games, but not in terms of actual real life footage, and it gives the game a very unique and creepy style, almost like the actions can be pictured in real life and not just in the game. Anselmo makes his way up to the dirt road but spots a tranquilizer dart and looks at it closer. But then he eventually sees some kind of racetrack with bunting banners on the hurdles. And then up ahead is the Italian farm and a man waiting for us. A sign to the right tells us this farm's name is Casina Barot, with Casina meaning farmhouse in Italian. So this sign would most likely be Farm Barot. More importantly though is the man beside us, an obese man with a hat. After a very creepy close-up shot, a common thing in this game, we get the text card of the farmer's dialogue, welcoming Anselmo. He's been waiting a little while for him now, asking Anselmo if he had any trouble finding the farm. The game then presents a choice. A simple thumbs up or a thumbs down. And while this appears to be a branching moment, it's an illusion. None of the choices in this game actually matter. It mirrors a total lack of free will. For now, this choice is a simple yes or no. Nothing extreme, but later on they will be. Anselmo says it wasn't a problem, and once again we get shown off-putting hyper-focused shots of unblinking large eyes and the uncomfortable movement of the farmer's mouth. We learn that Anselmo has been told to work here by his father as a summer job, setting the game in, well, clearly the summer. He then walks away, telling us to follow. He will wait for Anselmo and stare at him constantly until he or we catch up. But we do a little exploring, finding a bin, nothing in it thankfully, and a notice board. Outside it has names and an X beside some of them, and the words Lister. Then another word that I would actually translate, but the game does that later on, as right now we aren't meant to be looking at this. We follow the large farmer into the relatively small farmhouse and get shown to a room, but before, we look at some pictures on the wall and what appears to be a crude drawing of a woman with sizable features and naturally a photo of horses. Entering our room, it's of decent size. The walls are quite grimy, but so is the whole house. The farmer then tells Anselmo to never ever go into his room, since it's private, which, that's a warning sign. He then leads us to his kitchen, an old-fashioned one, with a TV on the countertop, quite old-looking, and dirty plates in the sink, kinda like a student's house. The farmer then takes us to his vegetable garden, where he mentions how nice it is to grow his own food. We can see the Italian text is now translating when we hover over it. The words simply saying veg garden. But after we finish the first simple task, the farmer asks us a pretty normal yet strangely weird question. Do you like horses? We've barely played the game. Anselmo says no, but the farmer just brushes it off, telling him, well, you'll learn to love them. The farmer then tells us to follow, and we see his dog in his kennel, and get told his name is Fido, the dog. It simply just growls and doesn't actually move. We can only really see its head, and the rest of it is sitting in the kennel. Doesn't really blink either, surprisingly. Then the farmer takes us through the back, and we get introduced to the horses. Except they aren't exactly normal horses. Instead, they are naked men and women with horse heads in a wooden paddock. Looking closer at them, their bodies are centered, thankfully, and each horse head has a different pattern on it. But the one thing they all have the same is the white, unblinking eyes. From this, we can tell they are not real horse heads, it's more like a costume. Shocked, clearly, we speak to the farmer for an explanation, and he doesn't say or explain anything. He just says, let's take a stroll, and to get on the horse. We have 3 reaction choices now: happy, sad, and nervous. Given a nervous response, the farmer simply says, don't be shy, and then tries digging at his masculinity, then demanding that he gets on the horse. Let's talk a little bit more about this introduction to the so-called horses, the name of the game, and the haunting visual of humans in a paddock. And like mentioned in the intro, this is systemic dehumanization in the most literal form you could think of. The masks have totally removed the people's sense of individuality. They can only be identified by these horse masks, which, while having differences, clearly don't make people think of humans when they see them. Instead invokes the imagery of livestock, and their skin has been branded. The white eyes of the mask also hide the human's real emotions. Eyes are the gateway to the soul, and now they've been blocked out entirely. By hiding the human's face, we also lose one of our links to empathy. The more we see them as not human, the less we unfortunately care. It's actually a common tactic to make a group hate or overlook cruelty by dehumanizing them. You can find this all throughout our history. When one group or section of people get named after an animal, it's never really a good animal either, it's always like a pest. And one of the most memorable ones to me is the Rwandan genocide. You can learn more about that in the movie Hotel Rwanda, where the Tutsi were referred to as cockroaches in radio propaganda to make their extermination of life feel more like pest control rather than the horrific murder of humans. There's also a key reason for why the horses are naked, and that's not a fetish thing, it's because it's humans' most vulnerable form. And we can tell a lot about people by how they are dressed, social status, their jobs. Removing that has once more removed ways to identify them as unique individuals. This game is very heavily inspired by a very controversial Italian movie that after playing this game, I haven't actually watched, but I've researched a bit about, called The 120 Days of Sodom, or Salo, as it's more commonly known. And it's about the fascist Republic of Salo, and them kidnapping teenagers and trapping them in a villa. This was actually first a novel, an unfinished novel, written in 1904. And yeah, I don't think YouTube will actually let me say what it's about. Essentially similar to this game without the horses. Before we get back to the video though, there's one more part I want to talk about. And I know, I spent a lot of time on this analysis part. But that's what you get with my videos, a lot of analysis, which is why these videos are so long. But I want you to pay attention to how the farmer speaks to Anselmo. If we show the slightest discomfort at the thought of riding the horses, which are humans, he doesn't try to convince him or even justify the act. Instead, he targets at an insecurity of Anselmo. His masculinity, to be a man. And to be a man, you must do what I say, because you wouldn't want to be seen as a child, while patronizingly speaking to him like he's a child. By targeting his insecurity, the abuser can now control the person. And this is where the system part of systemic dehumanization truly comes into play. By making Anselmo move past his initial disgust and then complying with the task by controlling this younger person to prove themselves so they are not seen as a lesser person. And we see this in the game's choice system. We could have chosen for Anselmo to be excited at this prospect instead, but it doesn't matter, because the end result is always the same. The system doesn't care how you feel about it, only that you're a part of it. And this is the totalitarian structure. Anselmo gets on the horse, which is a man with a chain around his neck, and you control him. And you can see in the movement animations just how tiring it is for this man. But strangely, my first thought was actually, wow, these controls are terrible. And then I came to the realization, oh wait, it's not a horse, it's a man. I'm trying to control a human. And that's one of the disturbing tricks with this game. The horror in a meta way is when you stop thinking of these people as humans and more as animals. And the game design does this in a clever way with the repetition of mundane tasks. There's also some dark comedy in the visual of, well, a human riding a person in a human horse mask around. It's so absurdist you can't help but find humor in it, even though when you really think about it, this is horrible torture. We are physically exhausting these people for no real productive reason. Catching up to the farmer, he wants to have a race. And we get cheery music and the tone is changed to pure comedy on the surface. And while we are jumping over hurdles trying to beat the farmer in the race, someone is very clearly suffering under us. Winning the race, because of course I did, the game suddenly cuts to black. The cheery music is then gone and we're left staring at the two horses in total silence. The farmer then tells Anselmo the horses did a good job, and that he can reward them with carrots that we picked earlier. And when you feed them, they actually bend down and eat the carrots just right off the dirt. It's a sick form of conditioning which accept this role by rewarding them like animals. But it also shows something disturbing about the farmer. He really does see these people as his pride and joy, as his pet horses. The farmer then says the real work begins tomorrow, and asks Anselmo if he is excited about his new summer job. Then does the creepiest smile, and the title card of horses appears. By trapping Anselmo in its system, and by complying with this demand, Anselmo thinks that he himself will be rewarded and earn his place. However, the reward is actually the absence of punishment more than something actually he himself would gain. It's a hierarchy that he doesn't even consciously know about yet. Unfortunately, this mindset is exactly what causes people to be part of the machine of oppression instead of standing above it, or in what their mind would be completely removed from it. The next scene is us at the dinner table with meat in front of us, and the farmer staring at us. But the top of his face is half in darkness. His imagery looks almost exactly like that of Judge Holden from the infamous book Blood Meridian, and what people describe as one of the scariest and most evil fictional characters. I've also mentioned his name quite a lot on this channel now, and most likely will continue to in the future because a lot of recent horror games really love to use that imagery, and I can see why. It's very effective. The farmer talks to Anselmo, telling him he's glad he's here because he's getting old and the farm needs a lot of work. This implies that the situation, we will call it, has been going on for quite a long time, and now he's looking for a successor. It's like a really messed up Willy Wonka. It's the next bit of dialogue, though, that while subtle, tells us a lot about the farmer, as he talks about how wonderful it is to keep each other's company, and then tell me, don't you agree? And to me, this reveals the underlying loneliness the farmer feels because of his own sick decisions. By keeping these people as horses who, if you have noticed, haven't actually spoken a single word. He's in sole control of everything. But at the cost of that control is that he has no one to actually talk to. He's standing in a field full of people, and yet he's completely alone. And now he's desperately seeking reassurance from Anselmo because, and this is another key theme of the game, in many ways he's denying his own human need for social connection, or tried to. But as shown here, he still needs that validation. He's a very pathetic man. Anselmo can then choose to respond to this in a nod or a smile. So clearly, no actual choice. The farmer then tells us we are here for 2 weeks, but maybe we will decide to stay with him a little longer. And now we eat our dinner. This strange meat, we aren't told what this meat is, but I don't know if this is human meat, despite there being no other food source on the farm. But it's not a topic brought up in this game. Though maybe that's on purpose, maybe this is actual human meat, as the game does focus on the chewing and play the most disgusting chewing sounds, which I'm not going to include in the audio because it's not pleasant to listen to. And it doesn't really add much, it's just uncomfortable, but so is the whole game. And you can tag me however you like, I'm merciful. But the reason I don't think it's cannibalism going on is because we see how bodies are treated later on. But who knows, maybe that's a dark secret of the game that wasn't revealed, a question left for the player to chew on. The farmer then asks Anselmo if he wants more, and he clearly shakes his head, but the farmer doesn't care, and he gives him more anyway, reminding everyone he is in control and you have no choice but to do what he says. He tells us sweet dreams, and it cuts to black. But we later wake up in the middle of the night. We see a light in the hallway coming through the front door, and we still can't get into the farmer's bedroom. It's locked. So Anselmo heads out the one door that isn't locked. And outside is a projector and a barrel, and rows of horses sitting down, watching a screen with distorted music showing actual horses running in a field. And then one seat for Anselmo to sit down as well and watch the video of running horses free in the wilderness. The screen then suddenly glitches to the farmer mouthing something with his face being illuminated by some kind of light. Then suddenly the screen goes on fire. Anselmo stands, and turning around, all the horses lay dead. But are they actually dead or just switched off? Waking up, the farmer asks patronizingly if Anselmo slept well like a little angel. He made his breakfast, which is milk and cookies, but the cookies have a shovel pattern on them. Looking back on it now, I realize how childlike the breakfast is. Cookies and milk each day isn't exactly what one would call a typical breakfast. He then tells us our task is to feed the dog, and so we take some unknown scraps from a pot and put it into a bowl, and then give it to Fido, the dog, who woofs in response. The farmer then tells us today we are going to be watering the vegetables, and to fill up a watering can in a tool shed out the back. And we go to do that. But first we quickly check on the horses, who are all still alive. So it looks like last night they weren't killed, just like I said, unconscious, when the projector stopped playing. Entering the tool shed, we find farming equipment and the water can. Then fill up and start watering the vegetables. The last potato was quite hard to see. The farmer then tells us to put it back in the shed, but as Anselmo walks to the shed, on the way is one of the horses swinging from a noose attached to a tree. Somehow one of the horses had escaped, and the first thing they did was this. Running back to the farmer, he looks shocked and says, "Oh no, not again," implying this is a regular occurrence. If these people, upon finally getting a taste of freedom, choose to find a way to die, it says everything about how they feel about where they are. They aren't running for the gate. Their first and only priority is to ensure they can never be brought back to that paddock, and choose death over it. We then get told to get the shovel from the tool shed and dig a hole in the graveyard, which the cookies we ate at breakfast had a shovel icon on it. So each day these cookies will actually change to foreshadow an event. Anselmo walks up a small hill to the graveyard, which has quite a few crosses with names on it. The first being Fido, the next being Gondrano, and Bojackman. That's a funny reference. Then the name Mama and Papa. Oh no. Then there's another name, Bianca. But then we look back at the first grave. We've heard that name before. The dog is called Fido. So why is there a grave with the dog's name? So we run back to the kennel, but the dog is still there, now eating the food put out in the bowl. So the dog is fine, but there's a full grave with the same name. Anselmo goes back to the graveyard and digs the grave for the horse by the tree. Then returns to the farmer, who has the corpse down. We take the dead horse to the freshly dug grave, dumping him in. And then the farmer says very casually how that wasn't the best start to the summer job, making light of someone who has just died. Waking up the next day, the breakfast is the same, but this time the cookies have flower symbols on them. Upon exiting the front door, the farmer immediately talks to Anselmo, wanting to show him the task board, the thing we looked at when we first arrived on the farm. He then reveals it has the daily tasks and a list of the male horses. The player gets shown each individual male horse and their name, and told that fornication among the horses is strictly forbidden. And if we see that, we have to tell the farmer immediately. The horses are named Primo, Vento, Agro, Poldo, Bramo, then a really long name, Galapamama. You know what? We're going to look at the list for that one. Fritz, Aquilante, sounds like a bottled water company. Formalo, I think, and Otto. We can then look at the list and see some names have X beside them of varying numbers. We don't know what this means yet, but some names are also scribbled out. The farmer then gives Anselmo the next task to go to the graveyard and attach the name tag to the new grave, the horse that died yesterday, whose name was scribbled out, along with presumably the other dead horses, I presume. As Anselmo goes up to the grave, he hears a song, someone humming. Which there has been no other sounds of voices in this game since it's a silent film theme. But this time we're hearing something. Then beside the new grave, we see a female horse mourning Artax. She turns and looks at Anselmo, then points to flowers. And we pick up the flowers, and she makes them into a bunch and leaves them at the grave, then backs away, as we place the name tag for Artax onto the grave. This is the first part in the game we've seen these human horses show emotion. And when the farmer isn't looking, the horses or people clearly aren't as mindless as the farmer wants us to believe. Still able to mourn, clearly this female had some kind of relationship with Artax, which the name Artax is also a reference to the never-ending story, who, spoilers for that, the horse Artax sunk in a swamp after letting in the sadness, a parallel to show how Artax died of choosing death because of the sadness of the reality they are currently in. The fact the horses have some kind of human society with relationships is actually more human than the farmer. Anselmo wakes up the next day, and this is where the repetition of the task starts every day. It's the same thing. You wake up, you eat the breakfast, you get to the tasks. They normally involve the horses. This time the cookies are that of paw prints, like a dog. The tasks for day 3 are to feed the dog, pick the vegetables, and then give the horses some hay. However, when we give the foods to the dog, he's not in the kennel. And remembering the grave with the dog's name on it, Fido, we start to run towards the graveyard. But as we turn the corner, we find a human in a dog mask. And this is where it hits me. For all the time Anselmo was on the farm, there was never a living dog. He was always a human. The farmer's actual dog had already died and was in the grave, which is why the dog and the grave share the same name, and the reason we could only ever see the dog head in the kennel is because the human body was hidden in the dark, and he was just bending down like a dog. So now the mystery is, how are these people getting changed into acting like animals? Anselmo then looks towards the paddock and sees movement. 2 horses are fornicating, in which it's humans fornicating. So obviously I can't show that. I think that's a thing though the game does really well. It's not just there to be shocking, it plays into the story. In fact, a big theme of this game involves human desires, such as natural urges essentially. But we were told if we saw this to go tell the farmer. But we also first need to pick the vegetables and give the horses hay. And I don't even want to know what the effects on the human body of a diet consisting of only hay and the occasional carrot would be like. Is that even possible? In fact, it's not possible. So a theory could be the horses are actually sneaking off to eat proper food, potentially, since they should all be dead realistically. The farmer, after we have done the chores, congratulates Anselmo and then says, did we notice any of the horses fornicating? If Anselmo says no, he says, is that the truth? And that honesty is very important for a healthy relationship. I feel the farmer has never had a healthy relationship with anyone though. Lying to the farmer, we go to the evening dinner again, but this time the meat is kebabs. The farmer tells Anselmo he has mail, and we open up a letter from Anselmo's father telling us this is Anselmo's 20th birthday. And he's now reached an age where it's time to start taking responsibility for his own life after wasting an entire semester. Which is why he has this summer job. The father goes on about how Anselmo has disappointed them and to listen to what the farmer says and do his duty. The next letter is more kind and it's from Anselmo's mother. In fact, she's the opposite of the father, saying don't work too hard and she misses him, and that his father threw away his insect collection. While these seem like 2 relatively normal letters, it does play an interesting part in the narrative. The father's letter reveals to us that Anselmo was sent here as punishment. This particular farm as well that doesn't have any animals, and the farmer isn't related to Anselmo. So in my opinion, I think the father knows about the horses, and this is more systemic, like I mentioned. This place is for education, young men into adults, to fix misbehaving children or teenagers, maybe even older. To be what the institutions believe. Because his father's letter was all about how much of a disappointment he is to them. That he needs to man up and do his duty, or he is useless. This is contrasted with the farmer giving him milk and cookies and constantly treating him like a child despite him being a young adult. Anselmo is trapped between 2 mindsets of people that are trying to control him. He can't exactly return home until he's proven his worth. The same manipulation the farmer is trying to use on him. The dad has also taken away his personal passion, his insects. It's a weird personal passion, but whatever floats your boat. And instead he prioritizes him being a man and work ethic more than his own son's happiness. The mother's letter doesn't want this for him. But it doesn't matter, because the dad has the final decision. The sick part is both the dad and the farmer tell him to man up in a different way, but that actually removes his sense of will and makes him into an obedient worker instead of a person. It's never said if the father does know the truth about the farm, so this is theory, but I think it makes sense. The farmer says he had issues with his parents, and his dad was always going hard on him. And that they had a little dog who started misbehaving as they got older. The misbehaving being him rubbing himself on everything. But the worst offender was when their dog at the church rubbed on the priest's legs. Now the farmer at first, he thought that was actually kind of funny. But then in the afternoon, had him hold the dog down and remove his rubbing organ. This is quite scary in how the farmer might have actually been like Anselmo at first. Not this monster he became, but someone changed by his father's harsh abuse and lessons, shaping the farmer into what he is now. It also plays into the theme of natural urges being sin due to religious reasons. It was fine until it was the priest, because then it's religious judgment for a community that is clearly very into religion. The start of day 4 is the TV and static. There is no breakfast, and the dog is barking at the opened paddock, and all the horses simply stare back. We then realize we have 14 out of 18 horses out of the paddock, and it's our task to find them. One of them is at the grave, mourning one that was called Bianca. This is probably Bianca's lover. Picking them up, they go in our inventory, which is probably the strangest mechanic in the game. Maybe riding the human horses might actually be stranger. I guess it's trying to show them as less human, more like objects, as the corpse of them had to be taken by the wheelbarrow, but we can pocket them like an item when they are alive. Anselmo then finds a very strange discovery. The fence beside the entrance gate has been broken, and footprints in the mud lead outwards. The footprints then lead us to a female horse standing at the gate, and a male one outside of it escaped. The white-haired horsewoman then slowly points at this horse outside, then turns to look at Anselmo, mouthing out the words, or trying to, FR, finally saying freedom. The true desire of the people being forced to be horses. This is the first word we have heard these people say, from people we didn't think could even speak. There is no breakfast again, and simply one task: to meet the farmer in the backyard. Very ominous. Going round to meet the farmer, we see him whipping the female horse's back. He calls her a slur, telling Anselmo this isn't the first time she was able to open the fence. And our task is to get him cotton and hydrogen peroxide. We then have to clean the whipping mark scars from her back, and the woman actually whispers thank you, quite enough so the farmer doesn't hear. We then go right to dinner, this time a chicken. So I do doubt this is human meat, and I don't actually think cannibalism is part of this game. The farmer this time tells us he's proud of his horses, but every now and again they rebel, clearly because they aren't actually horses. He then tells us about one of the crossed out names, Fierro. A black horse with a white blaze and markings over their eyes. Fierro was actually someone who managed to escape a long time ago. However, with his freedom, he still lurks around nearby. Now, we've seen Fierro outside the gate, and he's still a horse despite having freedom. The farmer then explains that he hides in the forests outside and tries to sabotage the farm. And then gets frustrated, kind of like a toddler, in how they aren't acting like how good horses should act. The farmer then asks Anselmo if he has ever seen Fierro. Anselmo lies, or we choose for him to. And the farmer says if you ever spot him, to tell him right away. Day 6 onwards is where the plot really ramps up in terms of horror and story. Though surprisingly, most of the really scary scenes in this game are from dialogue, more than imagery. That's not to say there's no disturbing or scary imagery, there's a hell of a lot of that. It's the implication in the words that's truly the most terrifying. And this day has some of the most interesting dialogue, spoken by a character we haven't actually met yet. So we have to hose down the horses, which very much looks incredibly painful, getting blasted with cold water. Then the visitors arrive. A man in a suit and a woman. The lady walks up and down inspecting the horses before saying, "I want that one." She wants a female horse, with the costumed head having a spotted pattern. We don't get a list of the female horses' names, only the male. The woman then takes her for a test ride, with Anselmo having to hold the chain as she walks her, riding the horsewoman round the track. The woman is just constantly staring at Anselmo, before saying, "Are you new here? I've not seen you before." Suggesting this is a regular occurrence of her and her father buying horses. But then the woman says, "I know what you're thinking. I know these aren't real horses. But you know, the way they used to live, a lot of people find that unacceptable." The woman then says she personally doesn't care, but usually the people exhibiting immoral behavior also have dangerous ideas. And then tells her that her dad always says each of us is a cog in the machine, and we all must do our duty so that society can function properly. And that dangerous ideas are a concern for everyone, because if one part of that machine fails, everything will fall apart. And under no circumstances can that be allowed to happen. The farmer, he does what he does, and her father, he makes sure his business opportunities keep growing, showing us that this isn't just a madman's sick idea of human pets. It may have started like that. It's now grown into a legitimate business across a community. Then she gets to her final point, one of the most twisted, loaded lines in the game. In this world, on this farm, everyone who lives their life recklessly and indulgently ends up exactly where they deserve. And then finishes that by saying, "I hope you get to live your entire life as a human being. Good luck." And then just smiles the creepiest smile at Anselmo. It's now just confirmed to us that this horror isn't just on the farm, but it spreads out into whatever society this is. And potentially, there's a lot more people involved. Which, by how calm this woman is to be in a human trafficking farm and buying slaves, yet act like it's the most mundane thing ever, like going shopping for groceries. But then reveals she knows these aren't actually horses, but she has no issues with putting them into slavery, mimicking real-world history. And this is a complete unmasking of the farmer's attempt to make it seem as normal as possible. He has to lie to pretend he's the caretaker, but this visitor woman has no gain in doing that. The fact she knows this is a human and accepts that, but is still perfectly comfortable riding on a human like an animal, and the reason is because of her father's manipulation of her when she was young. This whole game has a theme of indoctrinating the youth, telling them it's normal and forcing them to comply with the rules at a young age. She's actually doing the opposite of dehumanization in a way, acknowledging they are human and still finding them worth less of a life. This, while being religious, is also a commentary on the elite and the wealthy, seeing the poor or even just less fortunate as beneath them and theirs to control and do whatever they want to. A direct comparison to the movie the game is inspired by, Salo. The woman then attempts to justify this inhumane treatment as because of how they lived and how they acted, they no longer have the right to be human anymore, or deserve to have any rights whatsoever. From her wording, this doesn't mean the people on the farm are criminals per se. In her mind, the farm isn't a place of horror, it's a blessing to clean up the outcast, the impure, the filth of the world. They are now treating humanity as not biological, but a status that must be earned by rules made by those in power. A direct commentary on the politics of fascism. The woman reveals that the elite have no use for people, only for parts, the cogs, the Anselmos of the world. This is the cornerstone of totalitarian fascism. As I mentioned right at the beginning, word for word actually, and directly proves my point about the fear of punishment is the only reward. The punishment is also clearly stated. If you do not comply, if you do not work for the machine, a machine that only benefits those in power, you will lose your right to be human and become property. In this game, literally becoming the physical representation of livestock. Because if one single part falls apart, if one person chooses not to comply, to rebel, the whole thing just stops working. They are actually more scared of individuals than the individuals should be of the elite. And to make sure that doesn't happen anymore, anyone who shows the slightest sign of not complying with the rules, in the words of this woman, the daughter, the ones with dangerous ideas, they have these farms, they remove their humanity as punishment. But to keep the cog running, they have turned their punishment into a business that performs labor, something we haven't seen yet in the game but will later on. And finally, we get to the most terrifying line. Subtle, casual threat to Anselmo that acts as the ultimate confirmation of the trap. I hope you get to live your entire life as a human being. Good luck. She has just told Anselmo his fate if he fails to follow the rules. He is now aware that those in power are always watching, waiting for the slightest sign of a malfunctioning cog, so they can justify turning him into property for his quote-unquote immoral thoughts. And if we look back at the letter of the father of Anselmo, that letter doesn't just read as a disappointed father, it now reads as a final warning. Before we go on to the next day, this is the part of the game that most people theorized was responsible for the ban on Steam. Because in an early build, this woman is thought to have been a younger child and still riding on the horse, which obviously lacks clothes, so that imagery rightfully raises concerns. But with the context, I think they were probably trying to show how young indoctrination happens at, so it seemed more normal as they grow up. However, it clearly wasn't the smartest decision, and I instead think having the person be older and talk about their father as the main influence on their opinions was stronger anyway. The next day, the cookies have love hearts on them. Happy Valentine's. The daily tasks this time have big writing on it saying, "Me like you." That's very odd and a different font than the rest of the tasks. Anselmo chops wood with the dog staring at him. Looking closely, you can see it's also a costumed head. Then we have a brand new task. Gramo is plowing this field. This is what the manual labor aspect is, to make the punishment productive. We take the plow and attach it to Gramo, and he starts walking in the muddy field, weighted down with the plow. Anselmo is then having dinner once again, and on the TV is a black and white cartoon of a man hiding in a horse outfit. And other stuff with drinking and fluids, it's really weird. The farmer tells Anselmo that this is the end of his first week, and his job is halfway done now. As said at the start, Anselmo is only on the farm for 2 weeks, and then they drink to celebrate. But once again, Anselmo says no, but the farmer just insults his masculinity, and then he mentions how he's getting old and he's going to wonder what's going to happen to his farm when he's gone, and how he has no one to take care of his horses. He then pours a couple more drinks, and Anselmo wakes up at night, and now the farmer's door has been left open, and a broken bottle is on the ground. But first Anselmo walks into the kitchen, and he sees in the doorway is unfortunately the shirtless, trouserless, but still underwear wearing, behind of the farmer who is just standing there. Anselmo takes this opportunity to find out what's in the farmer's room. And inside it's a mess, pillows on the floor, and a strange picture of a couple with a baby and drawn on horse heads over them. The cabinet is locked, but he can spot a tape inside, but the big wardrobe is not. And he opens it and he sees an anatomy poster of a human horse with strange numbers and a very disturbing voodoo doll with a horse's head imprint that's missing, and a Bible and a whipping cane and a chastity belt on the doll. I think we all know where this is going. Religion, chastity, the punishment, and when we look at the strange book on the desk, this becomes even more clear. The first page shows a childlike drawing of a mother, a father, and the son. The farmer is the son. And from this, we can see they have unhappy faces drawn on. But the son is happy when he is around horses, the actual animals. But then the son sees something strange. He catches the horses fornicating, which the dad sees, and he whips the horses, which makes the son upset. From this, we can see the farmer's hatred of fornication started by his father and was reinforced by seeing him punish them for doing it. So he came to associate that as a wrong activity that must be punished, animal or human. Anselmo then finds another book on the seat this time, and the drawings are more advanced. We see the farmer again, now older, and a woman named Bianca, who he's drawn with very sizable features. The love hearts clearly implying the farmer is romantically and sexually attracted to Bianca. Self-explanatory, natural human thoughts. However, the next page shows Bianca is in love with a man called Primo, a name we've seen before, because that's the name of the first male horse we've seen. The farmer is clearly sad and unable to handle rejection, but to make matters worse, he catches them both fornicating. The next page is scribbled out, so we don't know what happened, but then we see on the next page, the farmer is happy, and Bianca and Primo are now horses. Bianca being dead in the present time as the grave implied in the graveyard. Then the farmer's parents angrily approaches him and the two horses. However, something happened because now the farmer has taken his dad's hat and there's now 4 horses. So this book isn't exactly that hard to understand, and we saw from the graves, the mother and the father and Bianca have died as horses. However, what we do not know is how the farmer is able to turn people into the horses or make them think they are. We saw from the first night it probably has something to do with the brainwashing and screens, but we don't know the full picture yet, only a scribbled page. Leaving the room, we see the farmer leave out the door and find him out the back at the paddock. The glowing moon is particularly bright, and as we get closer, the farmer is also wearing a horse mask. And the dog is behind one of the females, wearing a spotted horse mask, who is on the ground. The farmer is then scratching at his chastity belt in an irritated, desperate way. And while this is clearly the farmer having those urges, but because of his childhood and father thinks of it as sinful and wrong, so instead he wears a horse mask. As he is an animal, the sin doesn't count if he's that. And on certain nights, he has his dog do the act unwillingly on his victims. This is Anselmo seeing the hypocrisy of the farmer. He punishes those who does what he desires himself. And then suddenly the farmer slowly turns his horse head to stare at Anselmo. The next day, presuming Anselmo just went back to sleep or whatnot, the farmer is at the table but is complaining about a headache. It seems he forgets what happens when he puts on the horse mask. He tells us to do the tasks, but when we look at the task menu, there's nothing. So we go around the back and we see all the other horses staring at one of the collapsed horses. The female with the spotted mask, and after the events of last night, they're now unconscious in the paddock. When going back to the farmer, he calls the vet, and the vet arrives in a white doctor coat and has taken the collapsed female horse out of the paddock. And he has a very emotionless face, but we can see the collapsed horse is still breathing. He seems in no hurry though, and says, "A poor creature," and that man is up to no good again, implying the farmer does this a lot. And oh wait, that's probably how Bianca died. And maybe the mother. The vet then wants to move them to the tool shed, so makes Anselmo get a wheelbarrow and places her lying sideways on the table. The vet then says, "Can you give us a little privacy?" while he conducts a checkup. And that she's in good hands, as modern medicine can work wonders. He then tells us to bring the farmer this, and he gives Anselmo a vial of horse semen. Why he would need that? Well, we'll find out later. The farmer just tells us to put it in the fridge, and then tells Anselmo to go check back on the doctor. Anselmo knocks repeatedly, and he receives no answer. So he knocks again. Nothing. Then finally, on the third knock, he gets told, just a second. And when he enters, he sees the vet is now bloody on the shirt. He's taken off the white coat, and the female horse is dead on the table in a very different position. All the vet says is, "I'm sorry, she's dead." No emotion, no explanation, even though from what this crime scene suggests, we know exactly what happened. And Anselmo was the one who helped to bring her here. With the previous events, we now have a look into the world of horses. It's not just the farm, this whole town or society it's set in is just as corrupt. From the buyers to the farmer to the doctor to the children of them all. It's a cycle of corruption, a wheel that's constantly turning and influencing each other to commit deplorable acts. The doctor, he doesn't report the farmer for doing anything wrong because he gains from the sick acts in the privacy of the shed. The businessmen, they don't stop the farmer because they need the labor, and the horses to make even more profit. A hierarchy of depravity where the farmer provides the livestock, the vet provides the disposal, and the elite / the business provide the capital. Human suffering has been made into a supply chain. The farmer just has one task, to go meet him in the tool shed. And inside, the farmer has one of the male horses hung up by chains, his legs opened, and the farmer angrily claims that he knows it was him and that he probably fornicated her to death. And that's why she died, referring to the unfortunate victim the last day. Now, the farmer knows deep down he's responsible for this. He may have claimed to have forgotten it, but he sees himself as a wholly religious man and facing the truth that he did this, that he was responsible for this, that his vet killed her, would destroy that image. So he creates a scapegoat, someone else to blame, another part of those corrupting powers justifying their actions by inventing a crime on an innocent person and then killing them or making them a target, purifying the sin. He shouts, "Fornicating is forbidden and good horses don't do that." It's very childlike frustration. He then takes a large pair of scissors and makes Anselmo hold down the horse to make sure the horse can't ever fornicate again, in one of the most horrific scenes I've seen in a game ever. After that vile scene, Anselmo then has to wash the blood off the floor with a mop, and evilly the game shows us the IRL footage of the blood and the mop, just to make the situation seem even more real in our minds. However, waiting at the door is a female horse, the one who said freedom to us. She speaks to Anselmo, saying her name is Linda, in not perfect speech, and claims, "You're different, I like you." So Linda was the one who wrote on our task the message. She then says she wants to give a gift to Anselmo to make him feel good. Anselmo denies this, though it is player choice, but clearly the correct choice, especially after what just happened in this room. Linda then says she's going to go now, but tomorrow, behind the graveyard, she will wait for Anselmo there. The scene then cuts to nighttime dinner, and of course, we have to cut a sausage for dinner. Yeah, they ain't subtle here. And also, the farmer knowingly chose this, maybe to see if Anselmo notices this power play and rejects it, by normalizing the actions of the day and reminding Anselmo he can corrupt him. He then speaks to Anselmo asking if there's a girl he likes, and how the farmer liked a girl, who we know was Bianca. But she wasn't nice to him, also known as she didn't reciprocate his feelings, and that to him is her being mean, instead of just her personal choice. This was the origin point of the farmer's delusions. What's very disturbing is how he's now called Anselmo Ansi, giving him a personal pet name, showing the farmer is now fond of Anselmo and springing it on him out of nowhere. Which suggests the farmer doesn't see him as a worker anymore, but an apprentice. a boundary that Anselmo has never agreed to. The farmer then reminds him that people will always disappoint you, and then subtly threatening him that he's a good man and you would never disappoint me. The next day, the farmer tells us that little eunuch out there isn't working, the one from yesterday, and it's Anselmo's job to get him back to work. We see on the lista, Grimmer now has 3 X's, and it's circled. From this, we can conclude the X's mean when the horses have done something wrong. 3, and they get scribbled, punished in some way. He's out on the field, just staring at the sky. It's a very somber moment of a human who's been tortured, who's reached his limits, kneeling in a field, too tired and broken to even move. One of the clever parts of the horses game is we never see the human faces underneath, but we can tell exactly what emotion they are feeling. The only sound effect we hear apart from the film projector is heavy, tired breathing. It really makes use of sound at key moments to just nail that narrative. At the entrance to the field, the dog waits for us, and he reaches out with a whip and a carrot. If you choose the whip, the scene ends quicker. So the dog, now angry, gives Anselmo a baseball bat. There is no choice in the end. All paths lead to violence, which Anselmo hits the horse, and we see him get up exhausted, but pushing along the plow. Anselmo at this point has almost fully taken on the farmer's role. But the daily task says to check behind the cemetery, and Linda is humming her tune that we heard earlier. She is happy Anselmo arrived and thinks he will help them, and shows him her friend, pointing at a stone in the wall. Removing it and peeking through, Fierro appears, the escaped horseman, and he tells Anselmo that Linda said you can help us, and that they are trying to free the others, now directly asking if Anselmo will help them. He speaks better than Linda, but still noticeably not perfect, saying we have plan. Anselmo agrees, and Fierro tells us we have to make a hole in the metal fence, then put sleeping pills in the dog's food. Interestingly, going up to the other horses in the paddocks, they are also humming the same tune as Linda. Anselmo finds a weak spot in the fence, and with a bit of difficulty for unknown reasons, cuts the wire to open up a hole. Then he does as asked, and puts the sleeping pill in the dog's scraps. Fierro says thank you, and that tonight, once the dog is asleep, they will make their escape. Linda tells us she won't forget us, and she knew we were different. And then thank you, and goodbye, and finally, freedom. And 3 a.m., Fierro approaches the farm. But this is not a happy game, and the hole has been boarded up, and Fierro is nailed to a post, having been caught, telling Anselmo, we failed, and forgive me. Who he is saying that to is unclear. Anselmo himself, most likely, or maybe it's the other horses, or maybe it's himself. They all apply. The horses in the paddock look down defeated, and entering the shed is the farmer and Linda. The farmer angrily shouts they tried to take all his horses, Fierro and this Slurwood. They were poisoned and killed Fido the dog. However, the graveyard is full, so there is no room to bury Fido. So he asks Anselmo for the saw. He then tells Anselmo to step outside. If he chose not to poison Fido, he is killed in a fight with Fierro that happens off screen. We return, and it's just bloody black bags and a dog mask. The farmer then tells Anselmo to put his remains in the trash, the bin that we opened right at the start of the game. There's also a really annoying fly on the screen and constant fly sounds, which I hate, and yeah, I'm gonna spare you from that. Now obviously Fierro being nailed to a wooden post is very religious symbolically. It's clearly a form of crucifixion, and also a foreshadowing to that very same concept. The tragedy of seeing someone who gained freedom but now lost it by trying to help others is so crushing. This one moment of hope is snuffed out, and the implication of there is no more room in the graveyard, and instead his so-called loving dog is thrown in the trash like garbage. The dog, who was also human. Dinner time now, and the farmer says, "Eat up, nothing goes to waste," as we just witnessed a huge waste of human life for a madman's desires. The farmer now talks to Anselmo about how he can't figure out how they managed to make a whole or poison Fido. Nothing more is said, but Anselmo once again wakes up in the middle of the night, and going outside he sees the horses all in a line, paying respect to Fierro, still nailed to the post, their fallen, attempted savior, who gave them hope that escape was possible. Now a constant reminder of the punishment for escaping. Fierro then slowly turns his head to look at Anselmo. This is the day we get introduced to one of the final people in horses, as the farmer calls out in his pet name for Anselmo. But first we look at the lister and we see Anselmo himself has been added with 1X. So the farmer knows that he was responsible for the whole, and is basically now considering him as a male horse now. But he's not changed him yet. And this is the horrifying realization of Anselmo, who did everything the farmer asked, and he thought he was different from them, and that he was above them, and therefore he couldn't be punished. But the farmer's considering him livestock. He is either to be purified or punished depending on his further behavior. And then we get introduced to the priest, who has been a friend of the farmer for a long, long time. The farmer talks up Anselmo as being a very obedient and helpful young man. But the priest just says to Anselmo, "Do you believe in God?" We choose to say no, and the priest says, "That's a shame. You would have been a perfect servant of the Lord." And the reason the priest is here is because the good farmer told him about some animals, some rebellious, wicked souls. And at first you think that's Fierro who tried to escape, or maybe even Anselmo. But then he says that they are very, very rebellious, and they require his blessing and a re-education to bring them back onto the path of light. The farmer then repeats the path of light like a chant. The priest goes on about how such wicked souls are the harbingers of doubt, and a mind that questions allows the devil to creep into your thoughts and to trust only in faith alone. The priest then says they will be taking that white mare. What's her name? Snowflake. The farmer named her Snowflake, despite her having a name, Linda. The name she told Anselmo, she still remembers her human name, not this fake name the farmer has named her. Now there's a lot to unpack here. And first off, the presence of a priest, a person who has the blessing of God and the war against the devil and sin, is the moral excuse for all that is happening. By framing the victims as not tortured but re-educated and saved, penance for their immoral sins, and to encourage Anselmo that doubt of anything going on, anything you morally might question, is the work of the devil. To blank that out, only trust in faith and faith alone. And faith right now is an obese, creepy farmer and an old man telling Anselmo it's okay to keep people as horses because of God. The farmer's delusions are being directly supported, and any doubt is gaslit away. Now the farmer and the priest are seen as the authority, the ones who you need to listen to, especially for a younger man who has been sent to work here and not question anything. Then we have to talk about Snowflake, the final dehumanization of a human, removing their name. It's also removing their history, and that new name is not her right to decide. It's the farmer who gleefully names her Snowflake. He doesn't care what her old name was. Her original name is part of her sin and must be washed away. The farmer really sees himself as a godlike figure and a holy man who can name his creations and be a savior. The removal of doubt is also key in building a cult and followers, which we can now see is very much what is going on here. The religious aspects haven't exactly been subtle, but now with clear confirmation that the only way to be good is to be complacent in whatever the priest or the farmer decides is just. And now both those monsters want to re-educate Linda, to remove any part of humanity that is felt until she is spiritually destroyed. It is the ultimate goal of those corrupt in power, turning a human being into a piece of property that is grateful for its own chains, a mental lobotomy. Anselmo follows the priest and the farmer to a cabin. We have seen in the night montage, but we've never stepped in it. They're just casually talking about the wine, excited about it. Then when they get to the front of the cabin, Anselmo's told to leave the wine and return to his duties, as Linda is left with them in that cabin for re-education. The next day actually starts with night. Anselmo wakes up, but the farmer's bedroom door slams open and an empty bottle rolls out. Then the farmer himself, wearing his horse mask again, walks out. And when we enter his room, the voodoo doll in the wardrobe is shaking. Anselmo then leaves the room and opens the front door, but in front of him is a church, with the horses standing to the side of the path in a line on both sides, whipping the air. Their waists are caged up. Opening the door to the church, the other horses sit on the benches. At the very front is a figure pinned up onto a cross. As Anselmo gets closer, he notices another one of the horses is pinned to a wooden pole. To the left, the farmer is excitedly scratching at his chastity belt again, and then the dog is lying full body again now in a coffin. So this is a funeral for them. Linda is the one strung up to the post, and the priest is also wearing a horse mask, and he throws a torch onto the wooden pile beneath her, burning her. Similar to the witch trials, as Linda burns, she calls out for Anselmo, and then we wake up to a literal real-life nightmare of the farmer bending over, wide eyes, staring at Anselmo in his bed. His presence is absolutely suffocating, and he leads Anselmo back to that cabin, but this time following behind him. Slowly they walk up to that cabin, the one he was never allowed into, but this time he lets Anselmo inside. And in that room is a man and a woman strapped down on a table. Finally, we've seen some human faces that aren't of an authority figure, but their current status is being restrained to a table. It doesn't exactly bode well. So we turn to the farmer, and he tells Anselmo he's proven himself to be a hard worker and always so dependable. And now we can help him with something very, very important. The farmer now completely trusts Anselmo and is unveiling all the truths of the farm to him. No more hiding the bad parts. He now fully wants Anselmo to commit to the atrocities. And we are finally going to learn the mystery of how he even changes people into horses. He found them blasphemous people desecrating his own woods with their impure acts, so fornicating in the woods he doesn't actually own, but he's claiming to. This also potentially tells us they had to do this in the woods, possibly out of fear of being seen or judged in the society we're in. Or maybe they were just feeling kinky in public. As we've seen, human intimacy is the ultimate hypocrisy of the farmer. He claims to hate it, but at night he is scratching at his chastity belt, and he's a prisoner of his own repression, while watching impure acts more horrific than normal ones. The first step is to take the metal collars in the closet and put them on the victims. Inside the closet is tons of horse masks. Anselmo does as he's told and puts the masks on first, then the chains around their neck so they can't remove them, which is something I never actually noticed till now. Then he tells Anselmo to take out a red vial, a white vial, and a yellow vial, then to pour them into a shaker, then to fill them up with 2 big syringes. The first vial is the horse sperm that the vet gave him. The next is horse urine. I'm never escaping the pee allegations. And finally, it's horse blood. The farmer delusionally thinks that by injecting those into humans, he will change them into horses. Anselmo does as asked and mixes them, then fills the syringes. He then gives one to Anselmo to give a shot to the male horse and gets shouted at for appearing disgusted by it. But he still does as he's asked and injects it, and then the male human neighs. which is quite a change into a humorous tone, because obviously that would not work and it's pure absurdist humor. But the game does play into the fantasy story aspect quite a bit, since real-life logic can't really be applied anymore. They just injected a man with horse urine and he neighed. The rules of the story are now whatever the farmer's will is. Or it could be a look into it from Anselmo's POV. Obviously, the pseudoscience of magic horse changing serums isn't actually possible or real, but maybe Anselmo is now an unreliable narrator in the story, and he's hallucinated the man neighing when it actually was a guttural human scream of pain, most likely hearing the horse sound instead due to the extreme gaslighting from almost all people, apart from the daughter, that these humans are horses and they should be treated as such, which is what he's been doing the whole week. I mean, it's a lot easier when you're constantly staring at a fake horse mask than a human face. And now with 2 new horses, the farmer and Anselmo have to test them out on the field. And it's another one of the races with bad controls because it's a human. It's definitely one of the stranger parts of the game. For how horrific the game is, it does have moments of just pure absurdist humor, like riding a horseman into carrot symbols around poles with a timer. And of course we win it. Then the cheery music cuts, and we get taken back into the reality of the situation. To complete the job, the horses must be branded. A fire barrel or brazier and an iron bar is used to brand the horses. The final step into making them from human to property. And Anselmo is the one who will do it. C and B, the initials of the farm. The farmer is delighted with Anselmo and he's earned his trust back. If he wants to own a horse, he has to catch one in the wild. The implications of that being very dark. Imagery of Anselmo holding the chains of the horses and we have to lead them back. I think now is the best time to talk about how this evokes into our brain a specific visceral image. It is impossible to watch this without seeing the visual language of the African slave trade, and it was this exact moment of Anselmo leading the chained humans across the mud. The true horror of horses isn't found in the absurd horse masks or the over-the-top mad villains, who kind of reflect reality now. It's the sickening realization that the atrocities we see on this farm aren't just a video game fantasy. This is a blueprint of human history, our human history. And once again, like with I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, I'm covering games that show the real ugliness of humanity, that shouldn't be censored or forgotten because it needs to be learned from. And unfortunately, this stuff is still happening today in the present, and if we do nothing, or we don't speak out about this, then we are no better than Anselmo. Fierro calls out weakly to Anselmo from his post and says to save Linda, and that she's beneath the cabin, that the brainwash will happen tonight, and to hurry, or it will be too late. Night comes, so he enters the cabin, and it's all bare, but he pushes the cupboard to reveal a hatch to a basement. A narrow stone corridor leads him to Linda tied to a chair with a spotlight shining on her in the middle of a dark, spacious room. Anselmo cuts the ropes and she says, "Thank you, my savior." He picks up the gun, but as he opens the door, it's now showing a projector screen. And as he walks towards it, it grows even bigger. And on the other side is all the horses clapping. We realize he's not looking at the screen. He's in the screen, the same one we watched on the first night, of the real horses running in a wild open field. Anselmo wakes up, and it was just a nightmare. He hasn't woken up to safety. He's woken up knowing exactly what he has to do. And I'm going to try and explain the ambiguous scene of Anselmo trapped in the movie screen of horses. And I think it's kind of reflecting on what Anselmo wants to be, a hero. It's why in his dream Linda calls him her savior. That's the role he actually wants to deal with the guilt in his mind. But it ending with them looking at him in the movie screen of real horses and freedom, ironically the same video that keeps them trapped, with the audience clapping, mocking Anselmo for believing he had any control. His heart pumping, full of nerves and fear, he makes his way to the cabin, slides the cupboard, and the hatch is still there. with the exact basement he saw in his dream. Or almost exact. Because wires are connected to lights, but most shocking of all, the door is different. A horseshoe emblem is hung from it, and to the right, a password-locked keypad. When he leaves the front door though, the farmer is waiting with a parcel. He says he can't believe it's his last day here, but he has a proposal that he wants to talk to Anselmo over lunch about. Anselmo then goes up to Fierro, who says he's dying. And where is Linda? Anselmo says it's password protected, and Fierro says the password is maybe in the farmer's room. And then he collapses. Anselmo finds in the kitchen the parcel opened and various bottles of wine in it. Anselmo sees this as an opportunity, so he invites the farmer to have a drink and to keep on drinking the wine in celebration of his last day. Eventually, the farmer gets really drunk and sings a song about a little house down in the Black Wood a farmer named Piero stood, and like in a fable, his mare slept in a stable, while he was most happy drinking all his tea. But a horse named Fierro climbed the wall and stole his mare. But now, like the fable, his mare sleeps in the stable, while Piero happily drinks his tea. From this drunken song, we may have just gotten the father's name, Piero, very similar to Fierro. And the mare is referring to Linda, with the tea being the wine, but framing it like he's the hero in a fairy tale. The farmer, very drunk now, goes to sleep in his bed, and shortly after comes back in his horse mask, and exits through the front door. But he left his bedroom door open again, so Anselmo sneaks inside and finds a key in the farmer's clothes, saying VHS. This opens the cabinet and he gets the VHS tape that was inside. We get shown a video of a younger looking farmer, but it's not the farmer, and he's not actually younger. This is actually the farmer's dad, and on the table is a Bible. Number 1, to always obey your father, and shows images of whipping. And number 2, to respect the law of God, showing footage of the church and the priest with a video of someone eating the pages of a Bible. And the voodoo doll in the farmer's room shaking about. And then rule 3, do not commit impure acts. The footage of horses fornicating and sausages getting cut, implying the punishment if those acts are done. To speak only when spoken to. Showing footage of restrained mouths, and the video just repeats. This is actually a puzzle in the game. The only puzzle in the game. And it has to do with the voodoo doll and the poster in the room. Every part of the body is numbered, and the number applies to what we saw in the video, in order of the items on the voodoo doll. So, for example, the mouth correlates to the number 2 on the poster, which was the last thing we saw in the video. Using this logic, we go back to the door and work out the code as 8692. And it works, it opens, and we go downwards now, till we get to another door. And inside is a massive room with speakers, and the farmer's face screaming, I am your master, you are my horses, and horses don't talk. Obey your master. Respect God. Repeating them over and over, with Linda strapped onto a wooden axe with a device booming this command into their mind, forced to look directly at the farmer's video, destroying the last of her humanity. Anselmo eventually finds the plugs to the speakers and rips them out now. The farmer speaks, but he can't be heard. But we haven't saved Linda yet. Anselmo grabs the rifle from the wall, but it has no ammo in it, and opens the drawers to find a key. But this key doesn't unlock the restraints for Linda. It opens a door, and that door leads to a room with film reels, tons of empty ones, all displayed on shelves, and a winding staircase that goes up. Anselmo then finds a pair of scissors, so he goes back to cut the rope to free Linda, but without that projector turned off, Linda will not move from her brainwashing. So Anselmo runs back up and sees the massive, otherworldly projector that's brainwashed all these people. the same projector we were shown glimpses of at the start and throughout the game. And he raises the scissors to that tiny little power thread and cuts it. And we see the farm now, and the horses, they all look up. Now not under control, looking towards the sky and each other. Anselmo then goes back to Linda. The video stopped and interacts with her. But then behind her is the farmer himself. Having found them, he screams at them for betraying him. Then he whacks Anselmo over the head with an unknown object, knocking him out. Anselmo then wakes up with the farmer staring over him, calling him a disappointment. And he thought they were kindred spirits. We see Anselmo has been bound in the cabin with Linda in the corner. Piero, the farmer, is still going on about how he was going to make Anselmo his apprentice. And keeps going on and on about being betrayed and how he punishes those who betray him. He picks up a syringe and then talks about how the person always faithful to him was his little dog Fido. In the corner, Linda wakes up and looks at her surroundings, then starts sneaking around. The farmer is distracted, talking about how Anselmo needs to learn to be loyal, and says he should be more like Fido. He prepares to inject Anselmo, calling him Ansi, but Linda has picked up the rifle and whacks him over the head with it. The next scene shows Linda having tied down Piero, coldly telling Anselmo to prepare the syringe. Anselmo then prepares it and looks at the vials already out, and it was dog blood. He was going to try and make Anselmo his human dog like the one we saw at the start. Anselmo picks up all the horse vials and pours it into the mixture, then fills up the syringe, and then Linda tells Anselmo to do to him what he did to us. And there's no moral, I'm not like them, I'm different going on here, or we should be the better person, because that's not going to achieve anything. And then Piero wakes up, realizing the situation he's in, terrified, screaming for mercy, saying he will give them his farm. Complete hypocrisy from his act of saving them as he claimed. Now seeing it will be done to him, he tries telling Anselmo he's such a good boy, even in this moment treating him like an infant or a dog. Linda simply says, let's do it together, and they stab the syringe into the farmer and inject it. We hear the first sounds of painful grunting in this game, and it's from the farmer. He says, I feel, and then he also neighs. Piero's screaming and begging for mercy has just proved that he never really truly believed his own fables. He knew the farm was a place of horror, he just enjoyed being the one holding the needle, the one in power. The epilogue of Horses shows us the aftermath of the events on the farm. Anselmo carries the now dead Fierro, who sadly could not be saved in time, onto a funeral pyre, with the freed horses now gathering around it. Anselmo then uses matches to light the fire and burn Fierro's body. The horses then hum their tune, and looking behind us, the farmer is fully a horse now, and from the burnt remains, Fierro's horse mask lies there. Linda picks it up and gives it to Anselmo, telling him they have to leave this place, and saying he's one of them now. Anselmo, now wearing the mask, leads the horses through the gate as the credits play, and we also see through that the mask has burnt the eye socket out, and this lets us see parts of Anselmo's face through the mask. Then they leave the cursed farm. It's not fully a happily ever after, as the humans weren't turned back to what they were, and Anselmo has run away from his family. But the farmer's reign of terror has ended, and Anselmo has fully been changed, yet not fully turned into a horse. But he's now one of them, the rejects of this society, the rebels, the impure, the problems. And Anselmo has chosen to give up their own freedom at the cost of losing his old life. Repentance for the sins he helped commit. Horses was a real surprise to me. So much depth in what I originally thought was just going to be a shock, horror, jump scare, scary game. Kinda gory. But that's the thing, compared to a lot of other games, Horses doesn't actually have that much violent imagery. It tends to focus more on the narrative and the themes than just, for example, showing like decapitated human horses for being bad or something to that extent. I mean, look, this is a game that's going to divide people. Some are going to see the visuals, hate it and walk away, or maybe the themes, and I don't blame them. But if you look past that first impression, there is a narrative here that is actually quite inspiring. We don't have people turned into horses in the real world, I mean I hope we don't, but we do have the systems of control and the propaganda that big projector, the farmer, and all these people in authority represent. The brainwashing and manipulation of information, and people in power who want to prey on people and have them be good horses. However, the farm is a reminder that fascism is actually pretty fragile. It looks big and intimidating, but it's all built on a lie. And once individuals are brave enough to step out of the false script and pull the plug, cut the weak power cord, then the whole thing falls apart. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. I do check every single comment, or the nice ones. And I will respond, though this topic might also cause some controversy. And because this game has so much scenes that were not allowed on YouTube, I was actually told it'd be a good idea to upload an uncensored version on my Patreon for free. So you can check that out after this if you want, and you can see the scenes I couldn't include, for obvious reasons, and a little bit more analysis on those scenes. Warning though, they are very dark. Speaking of Patreon though, you can click the Patreon or YouTube membership in the link below to join the channel and have your name appear here. For the first tier, the Satirical Charm Victims. This tier lets you get access to any bonus videos like shorter games I might cover, rankings, tier lists, stuff relating to the main channel videos, and your name appearing in this segment. And a vocal shout out to the next tier, the horror game protagonists, Frank and Beans, Luna Verity, and Joan Stone. And finally, a special shout out to the heroes and heroines tier, Jack Xiao Long, Balabil, Tisol, Audris, Bakwas, and Leah. This tier gives you access to director's commentaries with more insight into the creative process and reflecting on the finished video. They also get an exclusive recommendation slot that will be randomly chosen from a random wheel after a set number of videos. My last video on I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream was one of those. And now a final thanks to everyone who watched this. The next videos are already full in production. We have very busy upcoming months with lots of content coming to the channel, and brand new games like Resident Evil Requiem and Fatal Frame 2 Remake coming out very soon. Oh, and one last thing. Comment below any games you want me to cover. It doesn't have to be extremely disturbing either, just anything you think would be good for the channel. I'm always looking. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.